And now she's here with us to really tell us what's fucked up in this system. Please help me welcome Danny Martin.
This is a man who has spent his entire life innovating for a better world, and I think we need to give him one more round of applause. What should be one of the most fundamental aspects of democracy, a free press, of course, has been corporatized, sanitized, and monopolized. The elites at the helm need to control all circuits of information, of course, in order to marginalize dissent and promote themselves. I saw the way it works firsthand throughout my career. I didn't start out wanting to be a journalist. I began as an anti-war activist and organizer in college during the lead up to the Iraq War. You know, it wasn't just one issue, it was every issue, because it all stems from the same criminal, corrupt system. From net neutrality to food justice, I wanted to build upon an underreported aggregate of stories that impacted everyone, because I was convinced if people only knew what was happening, if they only knew what this government was doing around the world, then of course they would organize to stop it. But informing the masses in today's world is a daunting challenge, given the state of journalism. It doesn't take long in your political awakening to realize that the establishment press we've all been trained to trust exists as just another arm of the corporatocracy, only utilized to maintain itself. When I first was a newbie, I got my official press badge and I was like, cool, now I can just go ask and confront politicians in the halls of Congress. And very quickly, the first person I saw walking down the hall was Rand Paul. And I asked him a question. I said, why did you endorse Mitt Romney? He ignored me, kept going. I thought that was the end of it. A week later, RT started getting calls from the Congress Press Bureau threatening to arrest me for stalking and harassment. I wanted to put it on air. They didn't want to because they were really catering to the Ron Paul audience at that time, and I was really new and I didn't really know what to do. The charges were all basically empty threats, but they did call me into the office, and I sat down in an interrogation room in the halls of Congress with all the main bureau chief heads from the corporate media networks, and they basically told me, you don't do that. You don't come in here and ruin our access that we've worked for decades to maintain. And that was my first lesson of how journalism actually worked in DC. In the words of Jacque Fresco, if you think we can't change the world, it just means you're one of the ones that won't. Thank you.
One of the things that attracted me to Jacque and Roxanne and the Venus Project is their understanding that without a science of human behavior, without an understanding of why we do what we do, that none of the vision of the Venus Project will ever be realized. Similarly to all other living creatures, our behavior is determined largely by the factors in our environment. The combination of influences throughout our lives builds our character. From the time our biological senses started to develop, different environmental influences have an impact on us, altering our behavior. Early childhood development determines behavioral health in adults, behavioral habits in adults. The culture we live in reinforces the habits that we acquired while growing up, and many undesirable behaviors are just products of long exposure to detrimental environments. Well, of course, I couldn't agree with that more, but that's a general assumption that I hope many of us share, that is that the environment determines our behavior. But I've been studying this and working on this for more than 25 years. What I want to do today is to describe for you how a behavioral science approach answers some of the questions about why we behave. I'm not going to offer too many answers about what we should do, because those are the much more difficult answers or questions to ask. I've written theoretical articles in a variety of different journals. I've published 3 books. I'm invited to talk all over the world. I'm not bragging. I'm telling you that when I am in a conversation with somebody about human behavior and they ask my opinion, which is an educated opinion, I hazard to say, they frequently go, well, I don't agree with you. Or that's your opinion. Now imagine if I were an astrophysicist and someone asked me about the recent discovery of gravitational waves predicted by Einstein's theory, and I told them and they said, oh, well, that's cool, that's your opinion. I don't think that's what really happened. Nobody would do that. But when you're an expert on human behavior, everybody's equal. Everybody's a psychologist. Because nobody pretends to be an expert in chemistry, physics, or biology. we all pretend to be experts in maybe the thing that's more complicated. First, we all behave. We seem to have intimate and personal knowledge of our own behavior. If you ask somebody why she or he did something, she can sort of introspect and look at what she was thinking or whatever and tell you that. Also, we've been told things about behavior ever since we could talk. The culture teaches us through our parents about behavior. One of those things is we have free will. I spoke at a skeptics conference in 2005. Now, skeptics, I thought were skeptical. But I discovered that they're only skeptical of obvious things like UFOs and astrology and stuff like that. The stuff that I'm skeptical about, they're not skeptical about because they all believe in free will. But we've been told that we have free will. We've been told that we can make our own decisions and are responsible for our own behavior. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Obviously, because I'm telling you this, it means I disagree with all of this. As I said, compare this to physics, chemistry, and biology. Nobody who doesn't have a degree in those things would ever pretend to be an expert, and yet we're all experts in human behavior. This is one of the hurdles that people like me have to contend with. Now, there are three assumptions in behavior science that I just want to go over briefly. And by the way, these are assumptions that contradict the way many of us were raised. The first one is physicalism, which basically says everything in the universe is physical. And you might go, yeah, I agree with that. But you see, you were all raised as dualists. That is, you believe you have minds and bodies. Some of you think your mind is your brain, but most of you think your mind is something else. Some kind of intangible, non-material thing that makes you do things. And we have all kinds of expressions in our vocabulary that talk about the mind. In my mind, I was doing, well, where is that? Was that like next to your bathroom? In my mind? You know? Explanations of behavior then have to point to physical events. They can't point to mental events. Number two, determinism. The assumption of determinism is that behavior is lawful and orderly, and it's caused by physical events. Now, a lot of people go, well, behavior can't be lawful and orderly because we're all different. Well, snowflakes are all different too, and yet the causes of snowflakes are exactly the same. Okay? So the fact that we behave differently doesn't mean that the causes of our behavior are different. That contradicts the notion of free will, by the way. And as I tell my students, whom all believe in free will, at least until they have me, they say, well, yeah, I believe that some of my behavior is determined and some of it I can choose freely. You know what I tell them? You got to pick a side. It's like being pregnant. You can't say, I'm kind of pregnant. It's like, you're either pregnant or you're not. It's just black or white, right? You got to pick a side. I've picked my side. It's determinism. My students, not so sure. Explanations of behavior, then, must not only point to physical events, they must also point to those laws that have been discovered. The third assumption is one called parsimony. That is, descriptions and explanations of behavior must make the fewest assumptions. Explanations, then, must be parsimonious. One of my favorite examples, a child throwing a tantrum. I'm assuming you've all seen children throw tantrums in stores on multiple occasions. Maybe some of you were those children. Maybe some of you still throw tantrums. So here's a child who throws a tantrum. The parent takes the child into the store. The child says, I want candy. The parent says no. The child starts screaming and crying and throwing things. So you go up to three people and you say, why is that child doing that? Person number one says, well, it's obvious. She's possessed by demons. And those demons making her do that. And so you go to person number two, and that person says, no, that's not it. Her id is so powerful that her poor, weak ego can't stand it, and the superego was never developed, so she's just completely id-dominated. You all didn't laugh as much at that one. And yet that one is no better than the evil spirits. And the third person goes, no, she tantrums because she gets candy. Now, a parsimonious description or explanation must point to the fewest assumptions. The one of those explanations that makes the fewest assumptions is the one that says she tantrums because she gets candy. The other ones make assumptions, many assumptions. Now, can we prove that she's not possessed by demons? No. Can we prove that her id is overpowering her ego? No. Can we prove the candy causes her tantrum? Yes. I've done it lots of times with parents. And the reason you can prove it is because the candy is physical and the tantrum is physical. They're both observable. You can do something about them. What are the traditional views about why we behave? I'm sure many of you still hold to this. behavior comes from within you. We behave because of what we think, feel, want, wish, decide, intend, and desire, or because of certain traits we have, like intelligence, aggression, shyness, creativity, integrity, or because of our genes and our brains. Hopefully after today you will be pleased to question these notions. By the way, these things, they're just words. Intelligence, integrity, shyness, they're just words. They don't exist anywhere. If you say she does something because she's intelligent, as Jacque said, show me the intelligence. Right? It's just in her behavior that leads you to say she's intelligent. And again, we freely choose our own behavior. Some people go, I know I choose my own behavior, I don't believe it's free. But you don't even choose your own behavior. I call this a naive philosophy that many of us have. It's taught to us by our parents as kids, but then it's codified by the social sciences, psychology, sociology, criminal justice, etc. The culture buys in to these traditional views. And one of my points today is, as long as we continue to accept that behavior comes from within the individual, we will never be able to figure out how to change our behavior in time to save ourselves. Most traditional explanations are faulty. I've given you a little example there. Behavior is determined by its consequences. I mentioned this earlier. Everything you do produces a consequence. When I push the button correctly on this device here, and my slide progresses, then that reinforces my behavior. I'm likely to push the same button in the same way. If I accidentally push a different button and I lose it, then I'm less likely to do that. I don't determine whether I'm going to push the button. This determines whether I'm going to push the button correctly. So let me go back to the child throwing the tantrum. Because the child's behavior is determined by its consequences, and so is the parent. This is very simplistic. But here we have the child is in the store with the parent. The child asks for candy, the parent says no. The child throws a tantrum. What does the child get? Candy. Okay. Now, you might say, well, because I know how I feel about children like that in public. I hate those kids. Shut that kid up. What's wrong with that kid? You know what? There's nothing wrong with the kid. The kid is behaving exactly as she or he should be behaving. If you could only get food by tantruming, guess what? That's what you would do. And by the way, if you think tantruming is something that all kids do, you're wrong. They don't. If you think it's something that all kids go through, you're wrong. If you take a kid and put them on a desert island all by themselves, they will never, ever tantrum. I'll let you think about why. But there are two actors on the stage. That's the child's behavior. By the way, that stands for positively reinforcing consequence. That means the next time the child and parent are in the store, the child's going to do the exact same thing. The parent is in the store with the child, and the child starts tantruming. What does the parent do? They give candy. What do they get? Quiet. The child stops tantruming. So the parent and the child, you would predict, will do the same thing over and over again. And they do. And it gets worse between the two. Some of you may know. I don't need to tell you that. My point with this example is this. Both the parent and the child's behavior are completely determined by the consequence. I've worked with a lot of parents. Many of them have children who cry or tantrum at various places. And if you stop giving the child candy, guess what? The child will stop tantruming. Do you need to talk about what the child feels, what the child thinks, what the child expects? No. You stop giving them the candy, they will stop tantruming. One of the problems with our culture is that we have no way by which to assess whether what we do works or not. And so we keep doing the same stuff over and over again, especially the stuff that doesn't work.
So imagine being stuck on an island with millions of dollars. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Well, unless you have the food, water, and material to build a shelter, you'd be destined for failure. So the real question isn't, do we have enough money? The real question is, do we have enough resources? With the technological capabilities of today, we have the capability to create a world of abundance and eliminate scarcity altogether. This is a small example of how inefficient our current system is. We still practice planned obsolescence, better known as the conscious withdrawal of efficiency. Today, companies create products that break and wear down after a certain time. They have to. Think about it, otherwise they go out of business. You gotta buy the next model. You gotta meet that profit margin. This, of course, is extremely wasteful and inefficient. So the real question isn't, do we have the money? The real question is, do we have enough resources? And the answer is yes, if we manage it intelligently. We all need the same things: clean air, water, food, shelter, and a relevant education to thrive. This is what a resource-based economy offers. So in the monetary system, the goal is to acquire property, wealth, and material. In a resource-based economy, the goal is to contribute to society and make the world a better place for everyone. Most problems today stem from a poor management and distribution of resources. A resource-based economy provides cooperation instead of competition, abundance instead of scarcity, equal access instead of profit, and humanity instead of money. Let's allow scientists and engineers to solve the dire global issues. Let's allow them to create a world beyond politics, poverty, and war. Thank you.
Now I'll announce someone more suited to present this to you than Roxanne Mathis.
So we are living in a time when science and technology are racing forward, but our social systems are static. We do see people protesting in the streets against the divide between the wealthy and the poor, racism, war, and sometimes they're able to overthrow the regimes that they're living under, but only to put in another incompetent political government. What the Venus Project has to offer is a workable plan for social innovation using the methods of science and technology to enable everyone to live and enjoy the benefits of technology equally. But the most relevant issue is that science has very little relevance to how we operate and organize society and the way we live and think. Science presents us with the best tools we have to acquire a testable body of knowledge. It gives us a closer approximation to reality and shows us what works. When we become more self-critical about our ideas and test them in the real world, we become more scientific, as opposed to wishful thinking and aspirations. We don't put the same critical thinking in examining our social system and our values as we do, say, even making a product. What would happen in a world without law and order? There would be chaos, there'd be murder, people would be killing each other and stealing from each other, just like it is today. So something's needed, but it's not law and order. Instead, it's environmental conditions that don't generate the need for human hostility. As a way out of our dilemma, the Venus Project proposes using the methods of science applied to the social system as a tool to elevate everyone. This can be achieved by a global resource-based economy, a systems approach. This, in turn, along with a new orientation, would enable people to update their values and change their behavior. When goods and services are made available to everyone, there is no need to steal. This is the most needed scientific experiment of our times. And it is the most taboo to even consider or talk about. What we have now is a failed experiment. It does not meet the needs of people, and it does not enrich the lives of everyone. So we invite you to join us in what could be the most exciting and rewarding social experiment that we could possibly take on. Thank you.
On the island of Tuamotu, my teacher said that the male has an unnatural behavior toward the female. I said, how do you know that? How do you know it isn't conditioned by society? She said, well, what else can it be? So when I got to Tuamotu, the people wore no clothing, and the male of the island never stared at the female body. They always looked at the eyes of a female when they talked to them. I went into all their huts, and none of them had a picture of a nude woman, because they were nude ever since they were knee-high to a grasshopper. They never looked at the female body, and there were no peeping toms on the island. In other words, they were shaped by the culture they lived in. If you were brought up in China as a baby, you'd speak Chinese and walk like a Chinese girl, and you'd have your arms in your sleeves and you'd bow like a Chinese. You wouldn't know anything American. So whatever you see out there is normal to that culture. If Beethoven or Bach were dropped by parachute over a headhunted village in the Amazon as a baby without any training, and you met him when he was 30 years old, say, what do you do? So I'm a headhunter. He wouldn't have written any of the symphonies. Do you understand that? There never were any good old days. There were slaves in the old days. And you think this is the greatest country in the world. That's what the Frenchmen think. They think France is the greatest country in the world. The German people think Germany was the greatest country in the world. So I'm just telling you the truth. I'm trying to give you a cerebral enema. The thing I always shoot as they put it in your head. It was only recently that women had the right to vote. Women in the future will be in politics. There'll be as many women as there are men. No more, no less. And women will have equal rights. If a woman becomes an engineer, she doesn't earn as much as a male engineer. Did you know that? So I'm just telling you, women are still abused by this country. And they will continue to be abused. And even if you tell women that they're equal to men, they don't believe that. Because they really believe the propaganda that women are not curious enough to be engineers. Yes, they're just as curious as men, and they can be anything they want to be in the future.